The war begins. The war between humans and the Xardak had been brewing for years, but it reached its boiling point when human colonization efforts finally clashed with the Xardak's sacred land on the planet Ytalis 7. The humans had no idea what they were walking into when they set foot on this alien world, but the Xardak had known all along. The war had been inevitable. The humans wanted to mine the planet's rare resources, while the Xardak sought to preserve the sanctity of their ancient home, a planet they had nurtured for millennia. Captain Anna Brooks, a hardened veteran of countless intergalactic conflicts, stood at the forefront of the conflict. Her dark, short-cropped hair was matted with sweat beneath her helmet, and the weight of her combat armor felt like it was suffocating her as she crouched behind a jagged rock formation, her rifle clutched tightly in her hands. The battlefield around her was chaos. Plasma bolts cracked through the air, leaving trails of sizzling heat that burned through the alien terrain. The ground vibrated underfoot as massive explosions shook the very air itself. Anna's heart was racing, but it wasn't fear that propelled her forward. It was the drive to survive and protect her team. She looked over at her soldiers, crouched and waiting for her orders. They were in a tough spot. The Xardak had superior weaponry and tactics, and the humans were constantly playing catch-up. Yet, Anna refused to back down. She'd fought too many battles for too many years to let this one slip through her fingers. "Captain Brooks, we're surrounded," Sergeant Alex Hunter, her second-in-command, whispered through their comms. "We need to retreat or we're going to get wiped out here." Anna scanned the battlefield through the visor of her helmet, the heads-up display flashing in her eyes as it calculated possible escape routes. She couldn't afford to retreat now, not when they were so close to completing their mission. If they could just secure the outpost, they could establish a forward base, one that could hold the Xardak off long enough for reinforcements to arrive. But if they pulled back, all of that would be for nothing. "Hold your ground," Anna barked, slamming her fist against the rocky surface for emphasis. "We're not going anywhere. Focus fire on the left flank. We need to take out their heavy artillery." The humans had managed to push the Xardak back in certain areas, but the aliens had far more firepower. Massive mechs that towered over the battlefield like metallic titans stalked the land, their heavy cannons firing relentlessly. Anna's squad had already lost 2 men, their bodies lying in the dust, their suits damaged beyond repair. She knew they couldn't afford any more losses. Through the chaos, a flash of white caught Anna's attention. A figure, tall and regal, emerged from behind the smoke and fire of the battle. The Xardak were known for their pale, silver-like skin and tall, statuesque forms, but this one stood out even more. She was unlike any other warrior Anna had seen before. Her hair shimmered like liquid moonlight, cascading down her back like a waterfall of light. Her combat suit was sleek and black, with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow as she moved, matching her graceful yet deadly presence. Anna's eyes narrowed as the figure locked onto her, and the tension in the air grew thick. The Xardak warrior moved with an elegance that was almost inhuman, her every step calculated and precise. She didn't rush, but her movements were fast, almost too fast for Anna to track with her eyes. She was a warrior, and Anna could see it in the way she carried herself. This was Skyla, one of the Xardak's most formidable fighters. The two had clashed many times before, but this was different. Anna could feel it in her gut. Something was about to change. As Skyla approached, the air seemed to grow heavier, as if the very world around them had paused to watch the inevitable showdown. Anna raised her rifle, ready to fire, but Skyla didn't seem threatened. Instead, she smiled, a confident, almost mocking grin. "You should know by now, human," Skyla said, her voice melodic and smooth. "You can't win this fight." Anna didn't reply immediately. She had heard the same taunts before, but today, something was different. This battle wasn't just about survival. It was about something deeper, something neither of them could yet comprehend. "You've been saying that for years," Anna said coolly, her finger on the trigger. "And yet, here we are, fighting on the same damn ground. Skyla's smile faded, replaced with a cold determination. She didn't need to say anything more. The energy between them crackled like static, the air tense with the anticipation of what was to come. Anna knew that this would be the final showdown. The battle for Ytellus 7 was coming to a head. Suddenly, the earth trembled as a loud explosion shook the ground beneath them. It was a blast that rattled every bone in Anna's body. She barely had time to react before a shockwave of force sent her sprawling across the battlefield, her helmet smashing into the ground, and the world around her went black. The bond unfolds. The air inside the medical pod was thick with a strange hum. It pulsed rhythmically, and the soft blue glow illuminated everything around Anna and Skyla. For a moment, it felt like time had frozen, as though they were suspended between two worlds. The battle, the chaos, the war, all of it seemed to have faded into oblivion. The only reality now was the strange bond that tied them together. Anna's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process what was happening. The last thing she remembered was the explosion, the shockwave tearing through the battlefield, tossing her like a rag doll, and then nothing. She'd awoken here, in this unfamiliar space, in the presence of her greatest enemy, Skyla, the alien warrior who had been both her rival and her adversary for years. Their battles had been brutal, unforgiving, but there had always been an unspoken understanding. They were two forces destined to clash until one emerged victorious. But now, everything had changed. The once unbreakable divide between them seemed to have dissolved, replaced by something that neither of them could fully comprehend. The bond they shared was not just physical, though their bodies were healing within the pod's strange blue glow. No, it was something deeper, more profound. Hannah could feel Skyla's emotions coursing through her mind. Her fear, her confusion, even a strange sense of curiosity. And Skyla, she realized, was feeling the same about her. Anna looked over at Skyla, who was still recovering from the blast. Her violet eyes were wide, and her expression was a mixture of disbelief and something else, something Anna couldn't quite place. Skyla was strong, an elite warrior, but this was uncharted territory for both of them. "Can you hear me?" Anna's voice was soft, as though speaking too loudly might break the delicate connection between them. Skyla turned her head slowly, meeting Anna's gaze. Her lips were slightly parted as if she, too, was struggling to find words. For the first time, Anna saw something vulnerable in the Xardak warrior's eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there, a crack in the armor that she'd never noticed before, and for the first time in their long history of conflict, Anna felt a strange empathy for her enemy. "I can hear you," Skyla replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this isn't possible. How are we connected like this?" Anna swallowed hard. "I don't know. It's like we're inside each other's minds. I can feel everything you feel. Your pain, your thoughts, even your doubts." Skyla's face flushed slightly, and for a brief moment, she looked away, her gaze drifting toward the glowing walls of the pod. It seemed like she was trying to retreat into herself, to hide from the intensity of the emotions now shared between them. "I didn't ask for this," Skyla muttered, her voice edged with frustration. "I didn't choose this." Anna's own feelings were a storm of confusion. She had spent so many years hating Skyla, seeing her as the embodiment of everything that stood against humanity. Yet now, with the bond between them, everything had changed. The animosity, the hatred, it all felt distant, like something from another life. And that terrified Anna more than anything. "We don't have a choice in the matter," Anna replied softly. "The pod, it did this. I think it's a medical protocol, but it's more than that. It's like we're being forced to understand each other." Skyla's expression softened, but there was still a hint of wariness in her eyes. "This connection isn't natural. It goes against everything my people believe in. You humans, you fight for everything, even your survival. But this is not what I signed up for. Anna felt a wave of sympathy wash over her. She understood that Skyla's words were not just a declaration of discomfort. They were a sign of something deeper, a conflict within herself. The Xardak were a people defined by their purity, their unyielding belief in their superiority. This bond, this shared experience with a human, was a betrayal to everything Skyla had been raised to believe. I didn't sign up for this either, Anna replied, her voice trembling with the weight of her own internal struggle. But here we are, and we have to make the best of it. We can't change what's happened. We need to figure out how to use this connection. Skyla frowned, clearly still processing what Anna had said. And if we can't, what happens then? Anna didn't have an answer for her. The truth was, she didn't know what would happen next. The bond was new, raw, and unpredictable. There was no rule book for something like this, but Anna had always been someone who faced challenges head-on, who made decisions even when the outcome was uncertain. This time, it wasn't just her life at stake. It was Skyla's too. They were now bound by something that neither of them could escape, and for better or worse, they were going to have to learn how to navigate it together. I don't know, Anna said quietly, her voice barely a whisper, but we need to figure it out. Fast. The pod hummed with a strange energy, as if it were responding to their conversation. Anna could feel the bond between them shifting, growing stronger with each passing second. She could feel Skyla's thoughts mingling with her own, and though it was overwhelming, it was also oddly comforting. They were no longer enemies in the traditional sense. They were something else entirely, a mix of human and alien, linked together by fate, circumstance, and the healing technology that had brought them to this point. For the first time in their long-standing rivalry, Anna felt a spark of curiosity toward Skyla. What was she really like behind the hard exterior? What drove her to fight so relentlessly for her people? And more importantly, why had she never questioned the war between their races? As the moments passed, Anna felt her thoughts turning away from the battlefield and toward the possibility of something else. Could they ever truly trust each other? Could they ever be more than enemies? Before Anna could continue down that path of thought, she felt Skyla's voice echoing in her mind. It was soft, tentative, like she wasn't sure whether to speak at all. I don't want to fight anymore, Skyla said, her voice barely audible in Anna's mind. Not with you. Not with anyone. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected those words. They carried a weight far beyond anything she could have imagined. Was Skyla truly giving up the fight? Or was this the beginning of something else? Anna didn't answer immediately. She simply let the words settle in the space between them. For the first time in their long history of conflict, they were no longer just enemies. They were two individuals caught in an impossible situation, forced to reckon with their past and navigate an uncertain future. As the minutes stretched on, the pod's glow began to shift from a soft azure to a warm, comforting amber. The connection between Anna and Skyla remained, but the tension between them had lessened. Whatever had happened in the moments before, it was clear that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in what felt like forever, Anna dared to imagine a different kind of future, one where they weren't enemies, but something else. And maybe, just maybe, that future didn't have to be defined by war. Unraveling truths. The pod's internal environment hummed quietly, and the once overpowering blue light began to shift into warmer, amber hues. The soft, rhythmic glow of the healing gel surrounding Anna and Skyla felt almost serene, but the silence between them was anything but peaceful. The bond, still very much in place, connected their minds in ways neither of them had expected, making everything feel more intense than it ever had before. For a moment, neither spoke, each lost in their own thoughts, feeling the subtle weight of what had transpired between them. Anna's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the new reality they found themselves in. The chaos of the battlefield, the harsh words, and the fierce confrontations with Skyla all seemed so distant now, like remnants of another life. The soft pulse of the pod, and the strange sense of connection she shared with the alien warrior were more immediate, more pressing. The questions that burned in Anna's mind felt impossible to ignore. What now? Skyla's violet eyes flicked over to Anna, her gaze piercing and intense. For the first time since their bond had formed, there was no hint of disdain or animosity in her expression. Instead, there was something akin to curiosity, an emotion Anna hadn't expected from someone so hardened by years of war. "You're thinking too much," Skyla said, her voice cutting through the silence. It was a statement, not a question. But Anna couldn't help but feel that Skyla could sense her every thought. Anna exhaled sharply, trying to collect her thoughts. "It's hard not to," she replied quietly, the words feeling heavy in the confined space of the pod. "Everything's different now. I don't know how to deal with this bond. It's like being tethered to someone you've spent your entire life trying to destroy." Skyla let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. The sound was a mixture of frustration and resignation. "I didn't ask for this either. I've spent my life fighting for my people, fighting for what I believed was right. And now, I don't even know what to think anymore." The admission was raw, vulnerable, a side of Skyla that Anna had never seen before. The Tardak were a proud and fiercely independent race, one that held their traditions above all else. Their honor was everything. To hear Skyla question everything she had once believed in was a shock to Anna, and yet part of her could relate. She too had fought for humanity's survival, for the sake of the future she believed in. But now it felt like the lines between right and wrong, between enemy and ally, had blurred beyond recognition. "I don't know how to fix this," Anna murmured, more to herself than to Skyla. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on her chest. "I'm not even sure it can be fixed." Skyla's gaze softened slightly, though her face remained as stoic as ever. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean we can't try." The words hung in the air between them, their meaning settling deep within Anna's chest. Try. It was a simple word, yet it carried so much weight. Could they really try? Could two sworn enemies who had spent years trying to annihilate each other truly find a way to work together? Could their bond lead them to something more than conflict? Anna turned her head, looking directly into Skyla's eyes. For the first time, she didn't see a deadly enemy staring back at her. Instead, she saw someone who had been forced into a situation as complex and unsettling as her own. Maybe this was the first step toward understanding. "I've always believed the humans fight for what's worth saving," Anna said slowly, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil swirling inside her. "We don't back down, no matter the odds. But I've also learned that sometimes we fight because we're told to. And I wonder if maybe we've both been caught up in something bigger than ourselves." Skyla's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe even a hint of agreement. "You're right," Skyla said, her voice low but steady. "The war, the endless fighting. Maybe we've both been blinded by it. But what else is there? What are we supposed to do now?" Anna considered the question for a moment, the silence pressing between them. She couldn't deny the truth in Skyla's words. For years, the human race had been at war with the Tardak, their differences fueling an endless cycle of violence. The reasons for the war had been lost to time, and both sides had been caught in a brutal, unyielding struggle with no end in sight. Now, here they were, two enemies, bound together by an inexplicable connection, forced to confront the very thing they had spent so long avoiding, the possibility of peace. "I don't know the answer," Anna said finally, her voice heavy with the weight of uncertainty. "But I think we need to find it. For ourselves, for our people, for everyone." Skyla was quiet for a long time, her gaze distant. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if they were both contemplating the same question. What did it mean to fight, and what did it mean to stop fighting? Finally, Skyla spoke, her voice soft but resolute. "Then let's try. Let's see what happens when we stop fighting." The words were simple, but they held a power that neither of them could have anticipated. It wasn't a promise, not yet, but it was a willingness to explore a new path, one that neither of them had considered before. The bond between them had forged an unlikely alliance, and it was up to them to decide what kind of future that alliance would create. The pod's light flickered slightly, the gel around them shifting to respond to their conversation. Anna could feel the bond between them intensifying, their thoughts blending together in a way that felt both disorienting and comforting. She could sense Skyla's uncertainty, her fear of what this new path might bring. But there was something else there too, something that Anna hadn't expected. Hope. Anna closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to absorb the gravity of the situation. The world outside the pod was still in chaos. The battle for Yalis 7 raged on, the war between humans and the Exardak still ongoing. But in this moment, in the space between them, there was something different. It was a glimmer of possibility, a chance that neither of them had considered before. For the first time since the war had begun, Anna allowed herself to imagine a different future, a future where enemies didn't have to remain enemies, a future where humans and Sardak could coexist, not in peace, but in understanding. Perhaps, just perhaps, the bond they now shared could be the key to something greater than war. As the minutes passed, the glow of the pod faded into a soft, calming blue, and Anna realized that she didn't need to have all the answers right away. What mattered was that they were willing to face the uncertainty together. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and mistrust, but for the first time in a long while, Anna felt something she hadn't expected, a glimmer of hope. And with that hope, a new chapter began, one that neither Anna nor Skyla could have foreseen, but both were ready to explore. The fractured path forward. The pod hummed steadily around them, a constant, almost soothing sound that cut through the tension in the air. Anna and Skyla lay side by side, still within the confines of the strange medical device, their thoughts intertwined by the bond that now connected them. Both of them had been forced to confront their beliefs, their past actions, and their futures in a way neither had anticipated. There was no escaping the truth now. They were bound, not by choice, but by circumstance, and the road ahead was uncertain, full of peril and possibility. As the pod's glow faded into a gentle, calming blue, Anna allowed herself a moment of stillness. The urgency of the war, the constant threat of danger, had faded into the background. Now, it was just her and Skyla, two enemies, two warriors, trapped in the same space with no clear way out. The world outside was still a battlefield, and the war between humans and the Xardak was far from over. But in this moment, it felt as though the world had shifted. The conflict was no longer just about who would survive, but about who they would become. Anna could feel Skyla's presence next to her, the alien warrior's emotions, her thoughts, even her doubts reverberating through their shared connection. For a long time, it had been impossible to understand Skyla. The Xardak were an enigmatic species, their culture and beliefs foreign to everything Anna had ever known. But now, in this fragile moment of peace, Anna could feel the cracks in Skyla's armor. She could feel the tension in her mind, the unease, the realization that the world they knew was changing. Skyla was as much a prisoner of this war as Anna was, bound by a duty to her people that had shaped her entire existence. But now that duty was starting to seem more like a cage, and Anna could sense the struggle within her, the fight to break free, to find a new purpose, to escape the endless cycle of bloodshed. As Anna lay there, she felt the weight of her own thoughts pressing on her. She had never been one to question the reasons behind the war. Not really. She had always believed that humanity was right to fight for survival, that the Xardak were a threat that needed to be neutralized. But now, after everything that had happened, after the bond they shared, she wasn't so sure anymore. Could peace really be achieved? Was it possible to reconcile their differences, to build something new out of the ashes of their past? Or were they doomed to repeat the same cycle of violence forever? The silence between them stretched on, the weight of their unspoken questions hanging heavily in the air. It was Skyla who broke it first, her voice soft, but filled with a new kind of resolve. "You're thinking about the war," she said, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. "About whether it's worth fighting anymore." Anna nodded slightly, surprised by how much Skyla could sense through the bond. It was as if the connection between them allowed the alien to peer directly into her soul, to see her innermost thoughts. There was no hiding now, no pretending. They were both stripped bare before each other, forced to confront the truth in its rawest form. "I am," Anna admitted. Her voice was low, almost hesitant. "I've spent my entire life fighting, thinking that it was the only way. But now, I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it anymore. It's all just killing, over and over. I don't know who I am if I'm not fighting." Skyla was silent for a moment, her own thoughts swirling in the shared space between them. Anna could feel her contemplation, the weight of her own internal conflict. The Xrdak had been at war for as long as they could remember, their existence defined by an unyielding commitment to their people and their way of life. They had never known anything else. But now, with the war on the verge of consuming them all, Skyla found herself asking the same question Anna had asked. What comes after the fighting? "It's the same for me," Skyla said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been fighting my entire life. For the Xrdak, for our survival. But now, I don't even know what we're fighting for anymore. The war has consumed us all. The line between right and wrong is blurred until there's nothing left to fight for but our own hatred." Anna could feel the depth of Skyla's words as if they were her own. The alien warrior's voice trembled slightly, betraying the strength she had always projected. For all her grace and power, Skyla was just as lost as Anna. They were both trapped in a war that had no clear victor, no clear end. It was a war of ideals, of survival, and neither side was willing to surrender. Until now. Until this moment. Until they were forced to confront each other, to realize that the true enemy wasn't each other, but the war itself. For the first time, Anna felt the weight of that realization fully. She had always believed that the Xrdak were her enemies, that they were the ones who needed to be defeated, wiped from existence for the sake of humanity. But now, as she lay there, connected to Skyla in ways she couldn't fully explain, she realized something fundamental. The true enemy wasn't the Xrdak. It wasn't the war. It was the hatred, the division, the never-ending cycle of violence that had kept both sides locked in this brutal conflict for so long. "We've been blinded by the war," Anna said softly, her voice trembling with the weight of the truth. "We've spent so much time fighting each other, we never stop to ask why we're fighting. What happens if we stop? What happens if we don't fight anymore?" Skyla's eyes locked onto Anna's, her expression unreadable. The question hung in the air between them, heavy and unspoken. For a moment, neither of them moved, both of them caught in the intensity of the bond they shared. The war still raged outside the pod, the distant rumble of explosions echoing faintly in the background. But in this small, quiet space, Anna and Skyla were no longer enemies. They were simply two people, two souls, connected by a force neither could control, forced to face the truth of their shared existence. Anna wasn't sure what would happen next. She didn't know if this bond, this connection, would be enough to bridge the gap between humanity and the Xrdak. But for the first time, she felt that there was a chance. Maybe not for peace, not yet, but for understanding. And that, for Anna, was a start. The pod hummed softly as the healing gel continued its work, and Anna felt a strange calm settle over her. She could feel Skyla's emotions, too. Fear, uncertainty, but also something else. A flicker of hope. It was small, but it was there. A spark of something new. Something that could be built, if only they were willing to try. As the pod continued its work, Anna and Skyla lay side by side, no longer just enemies, but something else, something undefined, something that could perhaps change everything. The choice of peace. The pod continued to hum, its gentle vibrations offering a strange kind of comfort in the midst of the chaos. The blue light surrounding Anna and Skyla had shifted to a soft, calming amber, a steady rhythm that seemed to mirror their own heartbeat. The bond between them had only deepened, like a thread tying their minds together, interweaving their emotions and thoughts into something new, something neither of them had expected. As the moments passed, both women lay still, each lost in her own contemplation. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was filled with the weight of what they had shared, the raw, unfiltered truth of their lives, their pasts, their regrets. And yet, despite the heaviness of the situation, there was a sense of peace, a quiet understanding that hadn't been there before. Skyla's violet eyes fluttered open, her gaze meeting Anna's with a newfound intensity. The usual walls that had stood between them, built over years of conflict and animosity, had crumbled away. There was no longer hatred, no more anger. Just two women, two warriors, trying to make sense of the world they now found themselves in. "I've never been this close to anyone before," Skyla said, her voice softer than Anna had ever heard it. "Not like this. It feels like I can't hide anything anymore. Not from you." Anna's heart skipped a beat as she processed Skyla's words. There was vulnerability in them, an openness that was rare for someone like Skyla. For years, the Xardak had prided themselves on their emotional control, their ability to remain distant and unaffected by the struggles of others. But now, in this strange bond, Skyla was forced to confront her own humanity, and Anna, for all her strength, was doing the same. "I feel the same," Anna admitted quietly. "It's overwhelming sometimes, the way we can feel everything. It's like there's nowhere to hide, no way to protect ourselves from the truth." Skyla turned her head slightly, her gaze intense as she searched Anna's face. "What do we do with it? All of it. The truth, the emotions, this connection. What happens after the bond is broken? Or what if it's never broken?" Anna didn't have an answer. She wished she did, but the reality was that neither of them knew what the future held. The bond between them was both a curse and a blessing. It had shown them the depth of their shared humanity. The fears, the desires, the hopes they had all along. It had stripped away their defenses, leaving them exposed to each other's vulnerabilities. But it also held the potential for something greater, something none of them had imagined. "We can't predict the future," Anna said softly. "But I think we have to make a choice to either continue down the path of war or choose something different, something better." Skyla's eyes flickered with a hint of uncertainty. "Choose something different," she repeated, as though the idea was foreign to her. Anna nodded. "Yes. We've been fighting for so long, believing that the other side was our enemy. But what if the real enemy isn't each other? What if it's the war itself? The hatred, the fear that has been passed down through generations. Maybe the true victory isn't in defeating one another, but in finding a way to end the cycle of violence, to break free from it." Skyla's gaze softened, and for the first time, Anna saw something new in her, something that resembled hope. It was faint, but it was there. "And you think we can do that?" Skyla asked, her voice hesitant, but her curiosity evident. Anna took a deep breath. She didn't know if they could end the war. She didn't know if peace was possible, but what she did know was that they had to try. They had to start somewhere. And maybe, just maybe, it had to start with them, with the bond they now shared. "I think we have to try," Anna said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "I think we can make a choice to stand together, not as enemies, but as something more, something that can inspire change. Maybe we're not meant to defeat each other. Maybe we're meant to help each other." Skyla didn't respond right away. The words hung in the air between them, a possibility that neither of them could yet fully grasp. But Anna could feel the shift in the bond. Skyla's thoughts, her emotions, had softened. The walls of suspicion and hatred were still there, but they were starting to crumble, replaced by something new: trust. After a long moment, Skyla nodded slowly. "I don't know if I believe in peace, Anna. But I do believe that we can't keep going like this. We've lost so much already. And if this bond means anything, maybe it means we have to try. For ourselves, for our people, for everyone." Anna felt a surge of gratitude flood through her. She hadn't expected Skyla to agree so easily. She hadn't expected any of this. The bond, the shared vulnerability, the possibility of something beyond war. But here they were, two women from opposing worlds, standing on the brink of something unimaginable. "What do we do now?" Skyla asked, her voice still unsure, but with a spark of determination. Anna thought for a moment. They were both still trapped in the chaos of the war, with no clear way to escape. But the bond, had given them something they hadn't had before: clarity. It had shown them that peace wasn't an abstract idea. It was something that could be built, one step at a time, one choice at a time. And the first step, for them, was simple. "We need to find a way to reach out to the others," Anna said slowly. "The human and Tardak forces. They need to hear what we've learned. They need to understand that there's another way. I don't know how it'll work, or if they'll listen. But we have to try." Skyla nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Then we do it, together." The words settled over them, quiet but firm. Together. For the first time, Anna truly believed it. They weren't enemies anymore. They were allies, united not by their past, but by their shared understanding of what needed to change. But the path forward wouldn't be easy. The bond that connected them was still fragile, and the war outside was far from over. But for the first time, Anna felt that there was a chance, a real chance for something new. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous weapon they had. A fragile alliance. The pod's glow dimmed further, transitioning into a deep amber, as if in response to the decision Anna and Skyla had just made. The silence that followed their pledge to try was both unsettling and peaceful. The realization that they were no longer enemies, that their destinies were now intertwined, lingered heavily in the air, their thoughts and emotions threading together in ways neither could fully understand. For Anna, it felt as though she had crossed some invisible boundary, a point of no return where everything she had known was about to shift. Skyla shifted beside her, her movements slow and deliberate, as though the weight of the moment was settling into her bones. Anna could feel her unease, the hesitance to trust, the deep-rooted suspicion that had been cultivated through years of war. But there was something else in Skyla's thoughts, something Anna couldn't ignore, a flicker of hope, a desire for something beyond endless battle. It was small, but it was there. The pod had done its work. The worst of their injuries had been healed, but there was more that needed to be repaired than their physical wounds. Both of them were scared in ways that no medical pod could touch, the wounds of their pasts, their beliefs, their identities as soldiers, as enemies. And yet, as the pod's glow dimmed further and the healing process neared completion, Anna couldn't help but wonder how long this fragile peace would last. "We're not out of danger yet," Anna said softly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that neither of them could deny. The war is still out there. And it's not going to stop just because we've decided to try something different. Skyla didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked up at the ceiling of the pod, her face a mask of concentration. Anna could feel her thoughts swirling. The strategy, the next steps, the questions she couldn't yet voice. The war wasn't something either of them could simply walk away from. There were consequences for betrayal, for even considering the shift in loyalty. They were still bound to their respective factions, their respective roles. And what would their people think if they discovered that they had made this unthinkable alliance? Anna could sense Skyla's fear, the uncertainty that ran deep in her. It wasn't just about the Kardak anymore. It was about everything Skyla had ever known. If she was caught aiding the human, even an ally, even in the name of peace, the consequences would be severe. Would her people see this as a betrayal? Would her family? Her comrades? "I know," Skyla said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were focused, but there was a distant quality to her gaze, as though she was searching for something just out of reach. "But I don't know what else to do." Anna nodded. The question was the same for her. What else was there to do? She had no answers, no clear plan. But the desire to stop the endless fighting was strong enough to keep her moving forward, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. The bond between them pulsed with an almost rhythmic quality, as if responding to the shift in their thoughts. The sense of connection had become both an anchor and a compass, pulling them in directions they hadn't anticipated. Anna could feel Skyla's thoughts, her fear, her uncertainty, but also something else, something that Anna had never imagined coming from her, a longing. Skyla's voice was soft but steady when she spoke again. "Do you think we can actually stop this war, Anna? Do you think we can make them listen? The humans, the Xardak. Do you think we can change their minds?" Anna didn't have an easy answer. The truth was, she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure if peace was even possible, not in the world they lived in. But there was one thing she was certain of. This moment, this fragile alliance, was the beginning of something. It wasn't the end of the war, but it could be the first spark of change. "I don't know," Anna said softly. "But I think we have to try. If we don't, then all we've done is give up. And that's not an option anymore." Skyla glanced at her, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. There was a flicker of understanding between them, a shared realization that this was bigger than either of them. They weren't just fighting for their people anymore. They were fighting for something that had nothing to do with war. They were fighting for a future, for a chance to break the cycle of destruction they had both been part of for so long. The silence that followed was different now, quieter, less tense. The pod, having done its work, began to shift as if preparing to open, to release them back into the world outside. Anna felt the pull to move, to act, to face the next challenge head-on. But something told her that the real battle wasn't out there. It was inside them, within the very bond that held them together. The pod's door opened with a soft hiss, and both Anna and Skyla looked toward the exit. The harsh realities of the battlefield awaited them. The human forces still entrenched in their positions, the Xardak leaders growing more desperate by the day. They knew the stakes. They knew the risks. But they also knew that, no matter what happened, they couldn't go back. The bond had changed them. The connection was undeniable. Skyla took a slow, steadying breath and stood, the graceful movement of her body a sharp contrast to the heavy emotions churning within her. Anna followed suit, her muscles still aching from the blast, but she pushed through the pain. There was no turning back now. "We have to find a way to speak to them," Skyla said, her voice low but filled with determination. "We need to show them that we're not enemies anymore, that there's another way." Anna nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. "I'll go to the humans," she said. "You speak to your people. We'll figure out a way to make them listen." Skyla's eyes flickered with a mixture of uncertainty and resolve. "I don't know if they'll listen, Anna, but I'm willing to try." Anna placed a hand on Skyla's shoulder, offering a silent gesture of support. There was a moment of quiet before Anna spoke again, her voice steady. "We've already made the hardest choice. Now we just have to follow through." Together, they stepped out of the pod, the harsh light of the outside world hitting them as they emerged from their sanctuary. The battlefield stretched before them, a chaotic blur of destruction and despair. But amidst the smoke and ruins, Anna and Skyla stood united. Two warriors from different worlds, bound by a bond neither could fully explain, but both were willing to fight for. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't have a plan. But they had each other. And sometimes that was all they needed to take the first step toward change.